Hello everybody, welcome to a new video in this new series, What Makes a Good... Last time I tried to answer the question what makes a good bench. This time I will try to answer what makes a good bin. And I'm not talking about bins and recycling setups you might have at home. I'm talking about bins, litter cans, garbage collecting containers out there in the city. And I will do this along similar criteria like last time, however a little bit different. The criteria will be location again, material, size and shape, and practicability. Practicability is something that seems more relevant to something like a bin than to something like a bench. Let's start with location. Obviously you want to put bins where there is litter, and there is litter where there is people, and there are people where there are things to do. Workplaces, shops, parks, all these sort of things. And I guess similar to benches, the more bins, the better. In this first example here from, I believe, Berlin, I want to highlight the fact that Berlin uses a lot of these small orange bins that can be attached to street lights, that can be attached to other kind of metal poles that stand around in the city. And the great thing about them is they have an ashtray for cigarettes in there, but they're also very, very small, and they can be attached to all sorts of things in all sorts of places. The disadvantage is they don't necessarily stand on their own, so they have to be attached to something. But it's smart because you can put a lot of these out there in this bright orange color. So, you know, that's better than having one bin for one square. This one, also in orange, but not from Berlin, I want to highlight as an example of, as a negative example, if you like, a bin in the middle of a, not staircase, but on a little platform between two sets of stairs, where I would assume no one ever stops, because let's be honest, walking down or upstairs is hard enough. Now maybe if you go there more often, you know that there is a bin, so you can take the rubbish you have carried around in your pockets for half the day out already and prepare to throw it in. But even then, you would have to open a lid to even get it in. And you know, if there's a crowd of people, I would imagine maybe there's a metro down there or whatnot, then you don't want to stand there and fiddle with your little plastic. But yeah, I mean, I think the issue is you want to put the bin where there are people, but you want to put it so that one person can actually stand there for a second and throw things away, as opposed to having to do it on the go. So you kind of want to put it a little bit on the side of a main path, if you know what I mean. Let's talk about material. Now, bins, just like benches, come in different materials, although in the world of bins, in my experience, it is not as diverse. Most bins come in some kind of metal variant or plastic. There are concrete bins. I know that especially in Eastern Europe, small concrete bins have been architects' favorites, but they don't really exist on a mass scale anymore. And metal seems to be the go-to. Now I think that's because it repels the water. Sometimes, you know, bins have a little roof. It repels the water. And also, more importantly, if someone was to throw a cigarette in there, it could just kind of burn without getting destroyed, which is not the case with these plastic bins necessarily. They do melt, and when plastic melts, not only is it disgusting and disgustingly looking, it's potentially hazardous. Steel ones, like this example here, which I would imagine is from Britain somewhere, London perhaps, I don't know if this is the Thames River in the background, can be made quite beautifully. I would say this is a very beautiful bin. It's a small bin, but it's a practical bin. You see the opening directed to where your hand would kind of throw it in. You don't have to throw it in from the top, you don't have to throw it in from the side. Throwing it from the side is, of course, instant no-go, red flag. And this I found as a sort of negative example of material, a beach bin on a wooden stick made out of plastic, sometimes even with a plastic bag inside. Now that would burn down very easily through one cigarette. At the same time, we have to keep in mind that you don't always want to put steel things in otherwise rather natural environments, you know. So it's a little bit a difficult decision sometimes. I would say that it's always best to provide some kind of ashtray, because, you know, how else can you prevent your bin burning down, because you cannot stop people from smoking necessarily, certainly not entirely. So, you know, a bin has to be so designed that people that use it wisely. People have to be educated as to how to use a bin. Probably, unfortunately, there's no such school that does that. Moving on to size and shape, I found countless examples of overcrowded bins. Now, I know that sometimes young people like me, I'm not saying it was me, just someone that is just like me, would consider it a funny little game to stack even one more item on top of it. But let's be honest, that's not the main point here. Now, this bin is completely overcrowded, and I'm sure you know many examples from your city or your village where this might be the case. And I think essentially it is an interesting thing, because as a provider of this bin, I know immediately, well, more bins are needed in this place. I can learn from it, right? So I put one bin there. In a month's time, I'm going to look at it. If it's looking anything like this, I can put another bin there, or I can put a bigger bin there, and I can put the smaller one somewhere else. So kind of bins have to be also adjusted. Sometimes I think, you know, they're seen as a sort of necessity, but no one really thinks it through, you know. And if you were to think it through, you would probably design them very, very differently. This one, for example, size and shape, is one of my favorites. Now, talk about color for a little while. I'm a little bit torn here, because on one hand, if a bin had a color vastly different from the surroundings, like the orange bins from Berlin, they're clearly visible. At the same time, the approach taken here wants the bin to almost not be there, to blend in the bin into the environment, which I can understand both schools of thought, and I think both have a sort of justification. I understand that people find it kind of annoying that you even have to have a bin in public space, because like it stinks. But at the same time, if you make it more visible, then people may be using it more often. I don't know if there are any psychological studies. But anyway, this one here out of metal with the nice recycling font on it is very nice. It's big. You can throw it in from the top. It has a little rim, so if you threw not too exact, it might just bounce off and still fall in. And it's kind of standing on the side of this wall, so if you came from by this wall or behind this wall, you could possibly stand next to it, because it has kind of the radius or diameter of a person, and just throw things away, sort your things out. There are two bins, so I would assume one is for, you know, plastic, one is for paper. Of course, it's not going to work 100%, but it's better than not having it, I think. And even pigeons love it. Now, practicability is something that I think it's quite interesting if you really think about your own usage of a bin. If you have to throw something in on the side of the bin, you kind of have to duck down and throw it through a hole, risking that your finger would touch this hole, which is like... Here at the top is better, but the problem we see here is the hole is so small that inevitably things gonna ending up on top of it, and with the first gust of wind are being blown off it. So that's not very practical. At the same time, people put their cigarettes there, and it's not quite sure if they should put the cigarettes there. Yeah, I think it's just somehow unfortunate. I mean, it's also obviously too small, or it doesn't get emptied often enough, or there are not enough bins, but I don't really consider this practical. Now, when we talk about practicability, one thing is also always how easy it is to empty it, you know. You don't want the garbage collecting team having to do too many steps in order to get the rubbish out there. Kind of just put a bigger sack underneath and let it all dump in without touching it and fiddling around with it too much. Now, this one is a real world example, but I kind of couldn't show you the real world example because you need to see what's underneath them. There are these bins, rather new invention, I think, I'm not sure, that have like a huge container below ground, and a small bin sits on top of it. Now, it's a good idea, I think. Obviously, the costs of installing something like this are very, very high as opposed to just one plastic box somewhere. But yeah, I think they are worth it because you don't have to empty them all so often. And even emptying them is relatively easy because I think these containers kind of come up to the surface, and then you can just maybe even use a garbage truck or something to empty the whole set of bins at once. Now, one thing that is unfortunate, that's also why I chose this picture, is you have to use a handle to open them. And I mean, who wants to touch a handle in public space ever, you know? Like, I mean, don't make people touch anything when they want to throw things away. This is just so counterintuitive, in my opinion. But yeah, still very interesting. So I think to provide a little summary of this literary situation, I don't want to say it too literary, is metal is good for bins if they have a little roof but kind of a hole on the top still, but the roof needs to be elevated on it so it doesn't rain into the bin and the bin doesn't collect the water. That's a good thing. If there's more than enough of them, that's a good thing. I would say more smaller ones rather than one bigger one. I mean, one bigger one maybe next to the entrance of a metro station or, you know, tram stop or something like this. Color wise, yeah, go as you like. Some cities are using bins to display their city logo or district. Others try to just blend them in with the surroundings, which I think was also, for example, done with these stone concrete bins in Eastern Europe. They just really kind of blend in. Wouldn't necessarily even see it if you just looked at the sort of entrance of a building. They were just standing there, small and cutely. And yeah, don't make people touch anything. Don't make people touch anything. And also think about the people that empty the bins. How easy is it for them to even get there? You know, is it like in a super crowded place where it's hard to even empty them? Can you empty them with a truck? And of course, costs are an important factor. But I would say go for something out of metal. Don't get too experimental with it. Make it simple, make it practical, make it usable, make it so that people can walk by without stopping, throwing things in there. And if you really want to give people different bins in a row to make them recycle their things, even if it doesn't work, but it's still better than not doing it at all. So yeah, I think these are my thoughts on the bin situation, and I want to thank you very much for watching, and I see you for the next video.